And this individual said, Councilmember Johnson, you realize your city is violating federal law. I said, are you being consulted about refugee resettlement? I said, no, I'm not even familiar with this program. So when I did this and I brought forward this moratorium, I mean, it was so bad, Michelle. I was wearing body armor under police protection. It was that bad. This was November 2017. And you're right. I mean, I was called an Islamophobe and xenophobe. I had to look up xenophobic because I don't stay on top of politically correct terminology. And, my hide's pretty thick. I like to have what we call an adult conversation. And I'd ask someone like, why am I an Islamophobe? Well, you hate refugees. I said, why? One gentleman said, I have a right to be here. I said, I was placed in Dallas, I think it was, through primary resettlement. Then I moved to St. Cloud. I have a right to be in St. Cloud. I said, sir, you do. I'm not arguing secondary migration. And I looked at him and said, did you read my one-page moratorium? He didn't even answer the question. His eyes glazed over, and he just wandered off into the crowd somewhere. And so that doesn't bother me. And when people call me all these names, I keep going back to the law, and that's what the moratorium was. 2/3 of it was just federal law that were not in compliance. And to this day, I couldn't get an answer from fellow council members, from congressmen, nobody back in 2017, because it was so politically incorrect back then. And look where we are today, 180 degrees difference from where we were in 2017.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Just click that button, be part of the audience. It's free. It costs you nothing. And you'll always have access to our entire catalog. We are interviewing the candidates running for governor in Minnesota, particularly on the Republican side. We know a lot about Tim Walz. He's not accepted an invitation to come talk to me. So I'm talking to all of the Republicans. So Minnesotans and really people around the country can side by side view these people, find out what's going on in Minnesota. People think Minnesota has a chance to turn red. So we're going to find out. Today, Jeff Johnson joins me. This is a different Jeff Johnson. We had a Jeff Johnson running in 2022. He did not go anywhere. This is a different Jeff Johnson. Apparently, it's a pretty common name here in Minnesota. But he has had a very interesting past, a past that involved having to wear body armor, a bulletproof vest while under police protection. You want to know why that is. It's a really important part of his candidacy. Jeff Johnson joins us next. Jeff, welcome. It's good to meet you. And I started with every other candidate asking why you think you're the person to beat Tim Walz.
Well, first of all, Michelle, thank you for having me on your show. And the answer to your question is very simple. I want all Minnesotans to have a better life than they're having under Tim Walz right now. And my experience on the city council for 8 years, actually, one of the highlights on the council was my stance on refugee resettlement back in 2017. So I'm known as the Minnesota axe grinder. I hate corruption, cover-up, screwing around, and happy talk. I'm an aircraft mechanic. I like to fix things. And that's just kind of the way my nature is in terms of fixing things and helping people live a better life in Minnesota.
For people who don't remember that 2017, what was your stance? Hey, let me remind you about my friends at besthotgrill.com because it's that time again. It's time to select presents for your family and corporate gifts for your best friends and employees. And you want to give them a gift that's fantastic, that's unforgettable, and truly hot. That would be a Solaire infrared grill from besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. It's really incredible. So they produce juicy and tasty food that is unmatched by conventional grills. Perfect for today's busy lifestyle, too. The hot and fast Solaire infrared grills are the gift that will be used. And every time your loved ones, your best clients, or your valued employees grill on their Solaire infrared grill, they'll think of you. All Solaire infrared grills are made in the USA. We love that. And they're made to last. More importantly, Solaire infrared grills deliver the wow that everybody likes to receive as a gift. Learn more about the amazing Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared gift giving at besthotgrill.com. For people who don't remember that 2017, what was your stance?
Well, I'm not sure how much detail the listeners remember about that, but I was the lone council member in St. Cloud that brought forward a moratorium on refugee resettlement. It became very, very controversial. I had media from all over Minnesota, including New York, Orlando, Florida. Laura Ingram's called asking for an interview, and it was just awful. And all I wanted to know is, where's the money going? And the taxpayers wanted to know how their money was being spent. It was a classic case of taxation without representation.
It is an issue still that seems to be resonating with Minnesotans and with people in other states as well. We're seeing some eruptions in a place like Dearborn, Michigan, where they are saying death to America. We are seeing a candidate running for mayor in Minneapolis who is a Democrat socialist. Certainly, we know how Ilhan Omar has represented or misrepresented this state. So, how do you start if you're elected governor? What do you tackle first?
You know, as a former EMT, there's something called triage. Right now in Minnesota, there's probably a dozen burning fires, as you know, that's going on. Everything from $1 billion of taxpayer fraud to crime to high taxation, and the list just goes on. And as governor, I'm going to have to go in there, and I realize that I can't do it by myself. I'm going to have to clean out the executive branch. I'm going to have to appoint godly men and women of good character that want to do the right thing, that care for people. We the people is the preamble of the Constitution. So it's going to be a team effort. The fraud is real high on the list. I don't know one other state that's achieved $1 billion of taxpayer fraud. As I said, if this was an Olympic sport, Michelle, Tim Walz would get a gold medal.
It is astonishing, and it continues to be uncovered, and people are going to jail, prison. Why do you think, this is sort of a strange question, but why do you think Tim Walz thinks he can get elected again with this cloud around him?
You know, that's $1 million question. I don't get it. This isn't a governor that had a bad year. This is a governor that's had a bad 8 years. And he finally said, well, I'm going to turn up the dial on fraud. This was last March, and I think the fraud was somewhere around $620 million. And back last March, I assumed that it's probably at the $1 billion mark back then, in which today we've seen that come to pass. I don't know, Michelle, what he's thinking. I don't get it. With all these problems going on, he's almost in La La Land or something like that.
You mentioned that you kind of have to start with triage. Like let's stop the bleeding for starters. One of the big topics that I see brought up again and again is the falling scores in education. That Minnesota used to be one of the best educated states in the nation, and the fact that only 50% of kids can read and do math at grade level is astonishing to me and very depressing. And I think it obviously affects certain communities more than others. Where do you start healing that wound?
Well, first of all, this is right in my wheelhouse. Education's in my wheelhouse. I've been a professor for probably 20 years. I've also been a middle school and high school teacher, Michelle, for a couple of years. And I even had the pleasure of being on a private school board and a school board chair. So over the years, I can pretty much tell what works and what doesn't work. And one thing that has to go, I think, immediately is DEI. Under a Johnson administration, DEI is going to be DOA. It's an absolute failure. And when the schools are starting to spend on time with gender pronouns and things of that nature, and we're going to forego, reading, writing, phonics, arithmetic, speaking skills, I'm astonished, especially since Governor Walz was a teacher. That just blows my mind. Of all people, you'd think he'd know better. So first thing we're going to do is get back on track. I come from a school where, if you fail, you're not going to be advanced to the next grade. You're just not. And I think that's the way it should be, because as you've seen today, we're producing graduates that are pretty much illiterate. And in St. Cloud, we've had a real problem. Some of our students can't even speak English very well. Well, they're already going to be handicapped, my goodness, when they become adults.
It breaks my heart, frankly, to see what has happened to kids in this state. Kids of all over the social spectrum. It breaks my heart. Crime is another one, and we know since the defund movement happened, and you know it's very possible that no matter who wins the mayorship in Minneapolis, it's going to be a leftist. I mean, Jacob Fry is just as far left as Omar Fateh, and I'm not sure how to say his last name. I hear it pronounced 7 different ways. So, but either way, you're getting a Democrat socialist in that seat as a governor. How do you work with that? Because Minneapolis is really the epicenter of the crime issues.
You know, it is. I wish as governor I can go in there and just remove mayors, but governors don't have that authority. And that's a real tough nut to crack, Michelle, when you're dealing with a socialist leftist that don't even like our police officers. You go down to other states like Florida, where there's a great relationship between the mayor and the council and the police, and there's a harmony that goes on. We don't have that in Minneapolis. We have just the opposite of that. And it's kind of like the frog in the hot tub. How hot does the water got to get before the frog finally hops out, before the people and the citizens of Minneapolis say, you know, this just isn't working anymore.
Yeah. Or the frog dies.
Waking up, but a lot aren't there yet.
Or the frog dies in the boiling
yeah, exactly.
pot of water, which is what a lot of people fear. You see a lot of people leaving Minnesota, and a lot of them being among the highest taxpayers. So everyone that wants to tax the rich and raise more taxes to just keep throwing money at these problems, there comes a point, as the old saying goes, you run out of other people's money. And so what about taxes? People complain that the business taxes are too high, that the property taxes are too high. How do you see the tax structure in Minnesota?
Well, it's horrible. Recently, I attended the American Experiment's Doge, and they had some statistics that every income earner at $25,000 and higher, there's an exodus. They're leaving Minnesota. The only people that we are getting are people that make less than $25,000. Well, in terms of taxation, you're not going to provide a lot of revenue with folks making less than $25,000 a year. In terms of proposed tax increases, the levies, I just saw that Thief River Falls, Michelle, they're talking about raising it by over 21%. And I talked to Senator Mark Johnson. I said, what's going on up there? And he said, school referendum. They want to build a new school, and it's at 21.8% or something like that. That's just off the chart. That's not sustainable. And when I hear this tax the rich, they're not paying their fair share. My question is, well, what is their fair share when they're paying 50% of their income in taxes, 70%? And there's an old saying is the gap between more and enough, it never closes.
Right. That's right.
I've never heard the left say, you know, thank you, Minnesotans. You've been taxed enough. We're going to give you a break. I've never heard that.
No, and that's how you wind up with millions and millions of dollars being spent fraudulently, and taxpayers deserve better, and they deserve to know. Jeff, there are a number of people running for this Republican nomination, and of them, I would say that your name is probably the least known.
Correct.
With all due respect. So how do you make up for that?
You know, and I've noticed that too for some time. A couple of points on that. One is some people confuse me with the 2018 candidate, Jeff Johnson, who was a Hamilton County commissioner who ran. And like you've noticed that the media rarely reports me as a candidate. Mm-hmm. Now, my relationship with the media historically, ever since the St. Cloud Council, has been somewhat tumultuous. Some people have called me up and said, aren't you angry about that? And the answer is, no, I'm not. It's like being mad at an alcoholic for drinking. It's in their nature. So the media is going to do what they're going to do. And your assessment is correct. They barely cover me in this race so far. But I've noticed that when I get out like this summer at the county fairs and talking to folks face-to-face in our gubernatorial debates, those are the hardworking people that are starting to figure out what's going on. So no doubt I have an uphill mountain to climb in terms of name recognition. I have an easy name to remember, but you're right. Most of the focus seems to be on Dr. Scott Jensen and Kendall Qualls and Kristen Robbins. So for me, it's politics. It's just the way it is.
It is just the way it is. Certainly name recognition helps. Kendall Qualls did not get the endorsement in the last gubernatorial race, and Scott Jensen did. And Scott Jensen seems to believe that he can overcome the issues that he had in that campaign against Tim Walz. I'm not certain that he can. What do you think?
Well, at least some of the feedback about Scott is, I've heard the term like Bud Light or Bud Light Jr. or things of that nature. And I'm sure folks say things about me. It's just the way the business is. I know Scott was kind of flip-flopping on Second Amendment rights in terms of gun control legislation as a state senator. And so there's some things that the voters do remember about Scott.
Well, he also promised to ban abortion, Jeff, and that was, I think, what did him in.
Oh, that was definitely a kind of a facepalm moment there as well. So time will tell if the voters will forgive Scott for that or not. I don't know him well. I think he's a good guy, but he's going to have to talk about that record. One thing I do in the council and as a professor is I really research things. At least I try to do it really well before I go out and publicly say things. So you've seen that with refugee resettlement. In terms of higher education, I do that. I just have documentation, so I really make it hard for my opponents to, they'll turn into an emotional argument. That's often what happens when you don't have anything logical to say or you can't refute the data. You go to emotional arguments, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of that.
The refugee resettlement issue really is interesting to me because it is, I think, becoming a bigger deal. And for some, they like to portray it as, oh, you're xenophobes. You can't. I thought this was America, the melting pot. Here's the thing: America has been a melting pot, but when you see other cultures not want to assimilate,
Correct.
not want to learn the language, not want to, obey the laws, take part in fraud, then I think people and chant "Death to America," the place that they say they
awful.
want to.
Yeah.
It's awful. I agree, and I don't. Look, we all have our First Amendment rights, and let them say it. It exposes who they are. But at the same time, I think it's starting to make some people question why we keep allowing people into this country who don't love this country, who don't want to be part of the citizenry, who don't want to live by the culture and laws that have been here for 250 years. And so when people suggest that is xenophobic, what do you say?
Well, I experienced that firsthand on the city council when I brought forward that moratorium because I got a call from FAIR, the Federation of American Immigration Reform, and this individual said, Councilmember Johnson, you realize your city is violating federal law. I said, are you being consulted about refugee resettlement? I said, no, I'm not even familiar with this program. So when I did this and I brought forward this moratorium, I mean, it was so bad, Michelle. I was wearing body armor under police protection. It was that bad. This was November 2017. President Trump was president back then. Rumor has it he was watching St. Cloud. I can't confirm if he was or not. And you're right. I mean, I was called an Islamophobe and xenophobe. I had to look up xenophobic because I don't stay on top of politically correct terminology. And, my hide's pretty thick. I like to have what we call an adult conversation. And I'd ask someone like, why am I an Islamophobe? Well, you hate refugees. I said, why? One gentleman said, I have a right to be here. And I said, I was placed in Dallas, I think it was, through primary resettlement. Then I moved to St. Cloud. I have a right to be in St. Cloud. I said, sir, you do. I'm not arguing secondary migration. And I looked at him and says, did you read my one-page moratorium? He didn't even answer the question. His eyes glazed over, and he just wandered off into the crowd somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't bother me. And when people call me all these names, I keep going back to the law, and that's what the moratorium was. 2/3 of it was just federal law that were not in compliance. And to this day, I couldn't get an answer from fellow council members, from congressmen, nobody back in 2017. because it was so politically incorrect back then.
Yes.
And look where we are today. 180 degrees difference from where we were in 2017.
Do you think we really are? How do you think we got here?
Oh, well, it's a mess. I think part of it is President Donald Trump is taking a strong, bold stance. If you're here illegally, you're going to be deported. I think that's the way it should be, because a lot of reasons. One, it's unfair to the people who've waited years and years to go through the legal process of becoming a citizen. I just don't understand why you can cross the border here illegally and then get health benefits in Minnesota, why that was going on. I guarantee that if I did that in France, started a company, and I'm there illegally, the French authorities are not going to be happy with me. So why do we do it in the United States? And Trump finally had the backbone to say enough is enough.
We can't argue with the backbone, and that is for sure. And I think that the border was a big part of the reason that he was reelected. And the opposite side, the left, they like to say how we are just, if we want border security and legal immigration, that somehow we're bigots. And that, the conflation between legal immigration and immigration, it's the smoke and mirrors that are being used to try to get everyone to feel bad for wanting the law. But I think what you said, holding people accountability and following the law seem to have really gone out of fashion in America.
It has. It's just awful. To this day, I don't understand why it took so much heat just saying, wait, time out. I'd like a moratorium, which is a pause in the program. And the leftist media said I wanted to ban resettlement. A moratorium is not a ban.
Right.
It's a temporary pause in the program. So even the mainstream media couldn't seem to get the story right. It's not a hard story. There are a few folks in the media that actually got it and did some more thorough research and actually read the moratorium. I know that's quite a concept there, and figured what I was talking about. It was all the economics. People would say, well, you don't like Somalis. I said, why Somalis? I said, I didn't say Somalis in my moratorium. After finally getting the abstract, there's 5 countries that participate in this program that come to St. Cloud. And we saw the county budget go from the black to the red in just a couple of years. So I'm following the money. And that's what happened. I was asking the tough questions. And you may remember Jody Harpstead. She was one of Walz's, the DHS commissioner. At the time, she was president of Lutheran Social Services. She was at the council meeting. She was so mad at me, Michelle, after the meeting, she almost sprinted down, almost pushed over a plainclothes police officer to get to me. I mean, she was mad. Why? Because I was asking all these questions about this program, and for Lutheran Social Services, it was a moneymaker. Follow the money.
That's usually a good place to start, is to follow the money. And speaking of that, money is part of campaigning. It's a reality. It's difficult. Everyone needs money to advertise, to print stuff, all of the stuff that you need to travel around the state. How are you standing financially? What do you want people to know? And if you want to plug how to help, that's fine too.
Well, a couple things is like with any of the candidates, I would certainly hope the voters would go just research the candidates. If you go to votejeffjohnson.us, you can read about me, what I stand for.
Votejeffjohnson.us?
It's just www or just votejeffjohnson.us. And that's a great way you can watch some short videos. I have something called Minnesota Monday Meme Madness. So every Monday we have it's a political meme on kind of I call it the issues of the day. And I just want to let listeners know that I am going to abide by the Republican endorsement. I was the 6th District Deputy Chair back when Michelle Bachmann got endorsed and subsequently elected to Congress.
So hold on a minute. What I hear you saying then is because other candidates are saying, to hell with the endorsement, we're going full primary.
Correct.
Which, quite frankly, I'll tell you, having seen that endorsement process having seen it up close, I think it's awful. I think
you're right. Yeah.
So why would you abide by it? Why not go to the primary?
Well, 2 reasons for that is, I just turned 60. I'm old school, and being in that process myself as deputy chair, it's just something I'm going to do. But I think more importantly than that, Michelle, is For me, it's going to be a litmus test. Do I have the support of the grassroots supporters or not? And that's probably more the important response to that. And if I don't have it there, for me, it's more important to get Walz out of there and get another Republican in there. And it may certainly not be me. And I'm okay with that. I'm walking into this race, eyes wide open. This is not some kind of a manly thing I got to do. If I lose, I'm fine with that. If Walz loses and we get another Republican there, we're going to still be far better off than having Walz for a third term. So that's kind of the way I look at that. A big part of me is really message.
Well, I have asked other candidates this as well. Should you not get the endorsement then, and you withdraw your name from the primary, and you're not primarying,
right?
Would you want to be part of the effort, not only to get someone elected, but maybe even have a role within the governor's, executive staff?
Well, I'm definitely open to that. By trade right now, as I teach, I'm a professor of aviation safety. I used to fly for the airlines. I was a mechanic, and it's a job.
I can think of some people that need your help right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So to answer your question, yeah, I'm open to opportunities like that. Like if there's an appointment in the executive branch where I could help, it could be transportation or something like that. I'm open to that. So I'm not lying awake at night, in anticipation of what that might be. But I'm certainly open to that. And, time will tell what happens. So there could be good things about running, even losing. So.
Yeah, you do have to think about losing when you run. That is for sure. Listen, I so appreciate you taking the time for us. I want everyone, whether they live in Minnesota or not, to have an idea of who's running. And so I think you have a lot of really good things to say. And you bring a different perspective to this race. So I end every podcast, Jeff, by saying be brave and do good. And I think running for office is one of the most courageous things someone can do. And I also think it's a sign of wanting to do good, at least for the most part. Some politicians want to do bad. Let's be honest. But I'm not going to put you. I'm not going to put you in that category. And so I wish you good luck. And again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your time today.
He is Jeff Johnson. Be brave, do good. We will see you next time. You can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.